Well, welcome back to the show.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to our listeners. If you are here with us today, comment away. We want this to be a conversation. That's why I go live. And even if you are listening to this after it is already closed or we are no longer live, whatever you want to call it, feel free to comment anyway, because we will get back to you. We are a sucker for a good comment and we are here for the conversation. Before we get into it, quick word on who's behind the show. I'm the CEO of MKG Marketing. Here's the thing I'm proudest of. Dan hired us once, then he took us to 5 companies. Joanne hired us twice. Marguerite took us left, right, and center all over the shop because every agency promises pipeline now. But that's the floor. What's hard to find is an agency that actually gets you, your category, your buyers, the way you work. That's the one that gets rehired. And it's a good lens for today's conversation because being an agency or the brand that gets the buyer is exactly what it takes to become the answer they're looking for. This show is for the marketing and go-to marketer leaders figuring out how to do more meaningful work, often with leaner teams, more tools, and a whole lot of noise about AI. That's you. You're not behind. You're probably just jumped into the middle. We're here to get you back to the beginning in the right order. And today, I get to do one of my favorite things on the show. Welcome back, a returning guest. Scott Wasserman is a fractional CMO for B2B SaaS and PE-backed companies, the founder of Wasserman Revenue Advisors, and the founder of the AI Fix. He's spent his career building demand gen and dark social programs that create pipeline instead of just capturing it. And he's now working AI into every layer of the engagement, from the signal-based intent systems to RevOps workflows. Less volume, more precision. That's the Scott Wasserman way. And he's coming in hot today with a take I can't wait to dig into. That rankings have quietly become a lagging indicator. The thing that actually matters now isn't where you rank. It's how often you're the answer. And AI chooses to surface. And he's got the receipts, a cybersecurity client that proves it out. Scott, welcome to the show. So glad you have it.
Thank you for the welcome back. Thank you. It was fun. Let's do it again. Yeah.
I know. I'll have you back again and again.
I hope I hope I can live up to that grand introduction that you just gave me.
Well, honestly, I just do a big intro because I got to give people time to get into the comments and come hang out with us. So
Fair
hopefully
enough.
You're all here now for the real juicy bit where we're going to spill all of the tea. All right. Real quick, Scott, for anyone meeting you for the first time, where are you now, what Wasserman Revenue Advisors does, and what the AI Fix is?
Sure.
Then I want to get right into the take that you brought today.
Sure. I mean, let's see, where do I start? I started, I was consulting for several years, back from around 2016 to 2020. No, I'm sorry, 2008 to 2016. And it was basically when digital marketing first kind of was really rearing itself, and you could start seeing metrics for what they are as opposed to tracking phone numbers, old school marketing. And I sold the company that I owned, bought or built this new consulting company, not really knowing what I was doing, and worked with all the content that HubSpot was putting out, because they were putting out so much training material as far as how to be a quote unquote inbound marketer. And I just loved it. And I love working with all these new different people. I would bring in agencies to help me do the things that I could not do. Like a company brought me in within a month and a half of doing this. Somebody said, "Hey, Scott, I got a referral for you." And I said, "Okay, great. Who is this?" And they said, "This is, the company Foster Grant, the sunglasses." And I'm like, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, the VP of marketing wants to meet you." Out of the blue. Now, coincidentally, I was living in Rhode Island, in the northeast part, right outside of Massachusetts, outside of Boston, and they happen to be that's where their headquarters are. And I went in there, and the guy said to me, okay, listen, here's the deal. We have 3 big sub brands. We're not just Foster Grant. We got these big time, money makers. They sponsor NASCAR. They do this. We need 3 websites. We need, can you do it? I'm not going to say no. I just didn't know how to do it. So I what do I do now? So as he sits here and literally just goes out, comes back and hands me a check. That was it. And Yeah, I mean,
Off you.
okay, I'm like, this is a cool world. I like this. And I just reached out to a couple of friends of mine, and they referred me to a couple of agencies that wound up were able to do all the heavy lifting for me and build the sites and do what I had to do and start working on back in the day, which was like SEO and all that crazy stuff. So that's what I did for many years. And then I wound up back going internal, a company that I was referred to as a consultant. They asked me to come on full time, and I did that, and it was a blast. It was a totally away from everything I always did. This was a total B2C. It was a company called Poseidon Expeditions. I'll give them a little plug. It's a Arctic, Antarctic, almost expedition to the North Pole, South Pole, well, North Pole, Arctic, Antarctic, all those different countries. They sent me to West Greenland on an expedition. Actually,
Did you see penguins? I gotta ask.
Of course I saw penguins.
Laura, he saw penguins.
Of course I saw penguins. I did not, I never made the trip down to the Antarctic, but no. But I learned a lot about penguins. I saw a lot of video.
Oh, penguins.
Yeah, penguins are fun, but actually it's funny, and I was not to get totally off topic like we always do, but that more recent thing over the past month or so, or 2 months ago, when there was this ship-borne illness that people were freaking out about, and the ship that they kept calling it a ship and a cruise ship that people were getting sick from rats and this and that. You remember all that stuff that was happening a few months ago? Well, they were actually an expedition company, not this one. I'm not going to name them, but a different one. And people didn't realize this is not a cruise ship. This is an expedition ship. We're talking not 5,000 people on a ship. We're talking usually about 150 people on a ship, much, much smaller. So that was driving me nuts for a while. But anyway, it was an expedition thing. Went up there, saw the whatchamacallit, Aurora Borealis, and took those little I forget all the names of this stuff, those little black boats to shore from the ships, like they have when you watch like SEAL team movies and stuff, those little black quiet boats. I forget what they're called. Anyway, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I was in, like I said, around Boston, wound up moving down south, and I basically stuck to getting back into more B2B, more tech, more SaaS, and I started working with smaller companies, working there internally, whether it be as a director of demand gen or whether it be as a director of marketing, whatever. But as you know, with many small companies and many small startups, whether they be bootstrapped or whether they be PE backed or they get heavy funding, they don't always make it. For whatever reason, they don't always make it. And marketing, I've always said, is marketing is in many cases, a lot of companies consider it a luxury. They may not admit that, but they consider it a luxury. Maybe they started their business. Right, it is. And it's sad because everyone always knows they need sales, but the sales comes from marketing. People don't buy the way they used to. We all do. Do. People don't buy the way they used to. They don't sit there, when you making, salespeople making cold call after cold call after cold email after follow up and all these things, trying to find that needle in a haystack. Whereas marketing, if the job is done right, that they bring in those high intent leads. And, we talked about this. I know we talked about this last minute. I'm sure we did, about things like MQLs that really have just been watered down over the years. And people, a company saying to the marketing team, why aren't your MQLs high? And, when you get what they consider to be an MQL, they'll say, well, just let the sales team call them. We need to get some things going. That's not how it works. And people don't buy like that. They buy in a new way. 87% of all C-level and VPs, exec levels will do research on what they're looking for before they even decide what company they're going to go with. And that kind of brings me back to your point about, and I'm not sure if this is what we talked about before we went live here, buyers do not buy the way they used to. They do all the research. And like I said, getting back to your point, we were talking about AI and talking about how people like search in all these large models, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, and that's where they do a lot of their search now. Very, very common, very simple. And some people don't know how to use the prompts necessarily, but you can just ask the most simplest thing. I mean, I look at, I use ChatGPT for my everyday fun stuff, just every day. We have this and this in the fridge. We're trying to find something to make. Give me a couple recipes, and that's great. And I use Claude for all my heavy lifting, and do everything else on that. Yeah, I just found it much better. I made that switch about 6 months ago after being on ChatGPT for years. But you had mentioned how, let's say you get a large company, big, they're, all over the place, very well funded. They got everything. They offer so many different things. And then you have a smaller startup company and maybe doing something similar. And in many cases, that smaller company will wind up beating them out as far as being found on these large language models.
My research is showing. I'm doing a big research project. I look forward to sharing it with everybody shortly. But yeah, that's what I did is I looked at cybersecurity specifically. I looked at 6 categories and I wanted to know, my thesis was, is enterprise going to beat out the startups because they naturally have a huge, massive digital footprint that the scale-ups now need to go create? And funny enough, it's actually the opposite. Enterprise is their branded search is falling off a cliff. They're not getting mentioned as much, and the startups and the scale-ups are coming in with guns blazing because they not only are building a digital footprint, but they're building like a targeted digital footprint, and they're doing it with a very specific message around the exact problem they solve, with language that the buyers can pick up and use that ties it back to the brand. Like Abnormal AI created behavioral security, right? I think it's behavioral AI. It's something like that. But because they have this word behavioral in front of it that's never been used before in the industry, people immediately understood what it meant, and now they're using it. And so they're actually like up and coming. So it was very interesting to like see that shift and to be proven wrong. I was so sure that we were going to be in trouble trying to like go up against these enterprises, and that is not the case.
I don't think so at all. I mean, I actually think that, again, it goes back to that bureaucracy, you have to get so many things done to do something within a big company.
True.
Whereas smaller companies that are more streamlined, that can, just spin on a dime, just make changes as they need to make changes. They're not willing to try. They're willing to try new things. They're willing to fail. It's not like they've been there for 100 years. They want to know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And they're going to go after the best and the brightest. And I'm not downing large companies by any means, but that's just, sometimes the more people you get into a pot, the more people you get to deal with. Whereas the smaller.
Other challenge, the other challenge is that as you build up your feature set, and as you solve more problems, you're now not solving any problems. You don't have any clear messaging that of like why you're different and why you're better. It's actually like a challenge we have as an agency. There's so many agencies out there, and pipelines become table stakes. They're going to talk about, oh, we deliver pipeline. You better deliver pipeline. Right? So it's like, why you? And you really have to do that deep work. And I think enterprises are now sort of coming to the realization that they have to get back to basics and get back to that work of like, what problem do they really solve for customers? And more importantly, why are they different? Why are they better? And why should people pick them? And they haven't done that work in so long that they're now behind the curve. It's really interesting how this is sort of shifted.
But also things go in cycles, and this is a very common thing that we've all seen in the past. So let's go back to, I don't know, the 90s, hypothetically. I'm just going to give you an example. IBM was called Big Blue. Nothing could touch it. Nothing could touch it. Well, as other companies started to come in and take away some of their market, as other companies would do things differently, they really stuck to that button up. This is who we are. We are IBM, and all of a sudden IBM was losing. and losing big and losing shares, and things were changing dramatically. And they have all of a sudden to realize, what do we do? How do we keep up? How do we make these changes? But when you have these smaller companies that are easy to pivot and easy to move and easy to just get around these larger companies, it's the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
different technology. It's just different technology. That's all it is. And it's a matter of just trying to stay acclimated and stay up to date. When it gets back to marketing, a lot of marketers, especially at these larger companies, they go in there because it's safe. They go in there because, they can do what they know. They can do what they are expected, what's expected of them. But they're not always willing to make waves. They're a corporate
It's so
person.
political, internal.
Yeah, exactly. They deal with the political nature behind the company, whereas they're not willing to stand up and say, something, this may have worked a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but it's not going to work today. And then having to have that conversation over and over and over again.
Oh, managing up as within your marketing team, and then as like the CMO to the board and to the
Yeah,
founder, like that is a muscle and a
yeah.
skill that is just absolutely something you have to have when you're in that seat,
It,
especially now.
it's a
We had a
skill I never had. I guess you can call it patience, lack of. But I think, I'll tell you why. I think it's where I started. I was never, ever, I didn't start off like, oh, let me start off with this big company out of college. Well, I did. I was working for finance, American Express Financial, directly out of college for a very short period of time. And it wasn't like I was working for the corporate end. I was working for a very small subsect, financial planning, which was originally called IDS before it was changed to American Express Financial, and they bought it out. And but it was still a larger company, and just finance wasn't for me. That was like probably the biggest thing I ever did. And I'm sure you remember from our conversation, my next jump from there, because I was losing my hair very, very young, was to, well, at least people in the States, the hair club for men. I wound up becoming a hair club client because I was losing my hair very young. It really worked amazing. This is back around, I'm going to date myself, back around 92, 93. And, I was bringing, some people saw me and we were talking, and I brought friends in and they said, hey, would you be willing to work here? My father almost had a breakdown when he said, man, you were working for, I sent you to school, you're working for American Express, and now you're going to go work for the hair club? Are you kidding me? But what I'm getting at is that I was always in a position working for a franchisee who owned several offices, working with a very small type company where, we had an owner that people knew of. I'm not only the hair club president, I'm also a client, Cy Sperling. May he rest in peace. He's, passed away several years ago. Great guy. We were like a family. It was a smaller thing, but we had no problem opening up to each other. And we used to get into battles, and discussions, but it was all like devil's advocate stuff. It was like, we'd always kiss and make up.
So important.
Yeah. And this is how we grew the business. And even Cy finally said, I can't grow this anymore. And the funny thing was, it was when he finally decided to sell, it was a big change for the company. It wasn't the same. And it was different. And I'm not saying it hasn't finally, grew and thrived over the years. It certainly has after several owners beyond that. But, this is the kind of company I was with all the time. And when I bought that franchise, sold it 9 years later, and I wound up doing the independent consulting, like I mentioned, the digital marketing.
Yeah.
That was
I wanna
still
talk about
working for
that.
myself. And then I wound up working with some smaller companies. And I only wound up within one large bureaucracy years later, for no more than 6 months. It just wasn't for me. It was not for me at all. It
I think
was,
I
you
do think
know,
it takes a certain person. I'm in the same boat. I can work with clients, and I've figured out how to build those relationships and plant those
yeah,
seeds, and then from founder to founder, I think
yeah,
helps as well. Um, that is but I am managing up, so to speak,
yeah,
in educating them on how marketing works, and I've
yeah,
built a lot of trust there to be able to do it.
yeah,
But yes, when you have that pressure of being within a big conglomerate and you got lots of teams under you, and you're then trying to convince the board of X, Y, and Z, especially in the changing. We just had a client whose enterprise years ago their board showed up and was like, we want to be number one for all of these terms, go bid on them so that we're number one. And like the cost of that is insane.
Yes.
Right. Like my point is that there has to be somebody in that seat. It takes a certain special person to be able to push back and to say this is why. And it takes time to build up that trust.
Yeah.
But going back to something you said earlier, in regards to you sort of bought into the inbound HubSpot way of doing things.
Yes.
It feels like, because we were just talking about the MQL and gated content and all these other things, and in our previous conversation we talked about this too, but it feels like that you've moved away from that. When was that moment for you where like sort of just forgive the analogy, but that's sort of come to Jesus like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. This isn't working anymore, if it ever worked. Where was sort of that moment for you?
When you say this is when you said this is what I thought it was, meaning the type of work we were doing as inbound at the time, or?
So I have the opinion,
and
you're going to maybe you're going to disagree with me, which is going to be great because that's what makes this show so awesome. Is I love when people disagree with me. But I'm of the opinion, and hindsight is 2020, right? Like
always.
Looking back on it, for
Always.
sure, it's 2020.
Yes.
But I sort of have this feeling that inbound and lead gen and this chasing the lead sort of mentality, the MQL, sort of broke marketing. And we're kind of like now in this bed that we have to lie in that we made and figure out how to fix it.
Right.
And the fix is not some silver bullet that's going to show up and allow us to just, flip the covers over. Like this is a big brand build initiative that we have to get back to.
Right.
And I'm just curious where you feel like that shift happened. And if you agree with me that is the case.
Yes. And I do agree with you more than you probably think. No, it's just true. Several years ago, I was working with a company, part of the demand generation team. It was for health tech stuff that we did. And, I was brought up, meaning from my days of, HubSpot. I was a reseller for HubSpot. I did a lot of early training with them. I did a lot of beta testing for their CRM when they were kind of breaking off with Salesforce at the time. And I, MQLs were a thing. It made sense. It's like, okay, let's set up a scoring system and let's say HubSpot. And, if they have this touch, they're going to get this point. And, when they hit a certain level, that's when, okay, boom, it's now an MQL. They're showing enough intent. Let's toss them over the wall to sales and let's see what they can do to get them to an SQL. Okay. Made sense. It's seems like common sense. Unfortunately, companies relied, especially people that don't understand marketing, rely on this term MQL, that this is a marketing qualified lead. And that marketing qualified lead sometimes turned into, wow, he downloaded an ebook last night. That's what we used to do, top of the funnel. Let's put out an ebook on a paid ad and, free download ebook, yada, 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 and okay. And they do. And that was just supposed to be an initial boom. Again, top of the funnel, the first touch. That was the idea behind it. And now you can open them up to email marketing. You can open up to a lot of different things, retargeting and so on and so forth. So you could do all these things and the goal, what was the goal? Get them back to your website, show them the new blogs that you're putting out, put internal links in those blogs so that you keep them on your website. Why? Because it will help with SEO. The more people that are seeing your page, the more people that are on your page, the higher your rankings will be. At least that's what we were told. And that worked for a while. But over time, the buying structure changed. Google is no longer the only search engine out there. And I'm not talking about in comparison to Microsoft or anything like that. I'm talking about using and let's even talk about before ChatGPT, which basically just combs the search engines. But I'm talking about things such as LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a search engine. TikTok is a search engine. Instagram is a search engine. YouTube is absolutely. They're all search. There's a ton of them, and they all have their own algorithms. You can go down any rabbit hole you want on them. you'll get stuck in a lot of these rabbit holes you can't get out of, such as me with cooking and stuff like that, or foods and things that I start looking up. And of course, once I got into a Claude thing for a while now, it's all I see is everybody has a million Claude prompts that they think are going to change the world. It's just a different rabbit hole. But my point is that people buy differently now. They're not just relying on Google. They're not relying on, okay, let's get to the first page of Google. Great, that's the goal. We're on the first page. Why? Because back in the day, we used to say, because over 90% of people don't click over to a second page. They see what's on the first page. So initially it was ads on the right-hand side of the screen, organic on the left-hand side of the screen, and that was it. Then they started putting ads at the top of the screen. So now it's pushing down what was the original quote unquote, top 10 on that first page. So then that happened. Now we're moving to a point where Gemini is taking over what happens on the initial search when you do go on Google. So getting on the first page doesn't even matter anymore. It really doesn't matter. I mean, yes, you can, if you know how to click out of the Gemini thing, you can start to see more old school stuff, but that's not what it is. And that's not where people are always looking. They used to come to your website and read your blogs. But now if your bounce rate is lower than 90%, you're doing well. For a blog, to get just if somebody's seeing a blog, was it long? Should we do long blogs, short blogs? I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure, and to many in the audience here, but that's not what it's all about. It's putting that content in all different places, and not just in written content, in video, through podcasts such as this, snippets of podcasts. Then you get into the whole dark social thing where you can't even see what's going on behind the scenes. Well, let's say you make your post or I make a post and you get a couple people that, make comments in that post. And then maybe somebody likes a comment that somebody else made and they reach out to them on the side. You can't track that. No. You have no idea how you're going to track that. So it goes back to that Gartner study, and I've mentioned it before, where you get people that, like I said, C-level and VPs that will do, I think it was like 87% of them will do their research before they even come close to a company. And the ones that are out there, like we talked about, the smaller startups that are really out there and they're all over, all over the place, and they're found in AI, much larger than the big ones. They're going to sit there and, somebody will eventually get to your website and hit that demo or hit that request this or request that and say,
better be front and center.
Yeah. And say, I see you everywhere. I see you everywhere and I know what I want. And you don't know, they've been discussing this in Slack channels. They've been discussing this in groups. They've been discussing this privately. Maybe they got on a call themselves. How do you feel about this? Where do you feel about this? Have you heard of anybody? It almost goes back to, again, full cycle prior to even the internet. Let's say, you wanted a restaurant recommendation, asked a friend, have you gone to a restaurant? Now, a person will tell you, oh, I had a great experience at this restaurant, and you may go. But if they say, oh, I had this worst experience at this restaurant, now, not only will you not go, you're going to tell 5 friends, don't go.
It's true.
It's the negativity of it. But we're back in a cycle now of, because this whole concept of dark social and not knowing where people are actually talking about you or how they learned about you, where it gets back to putting a question on the form when they do go ahead and get to your site and ask, how did you find us?
How did you find us?
Yeah, and old school. So you almost have to have a manual attribution model where it says, YouTube or Insta or, TikTok or LinkedIn or whatever, that's where they found you. They're not going to sit there and look at your website and say, wow, that's a very good website. And they put out so much information just on your website, No, they're still going to, they might see a couple pieces of content on there, but that's not going to be their final decision. Mm-hmm. It's going to be from all the information they got from everybody else. So when they get to you, they're basically high intent, 80% done. And as I've always said, I'd rather get 20 solid high intent leads a week, and I'm just throwing that number out there, as opposed to 100 leads a week that maybe just hit that demo button for whatever reason,
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Before with getting a download, right? You wanted as many downloads as you could get because to your point, then it became all that nurturing. But now we sort of this is where I think HubSpot and the inbound sort of notion broke, was not just in how buyers research, but in how they engage. They don't
Right.
want it anymore. They're afraid to give us their email address because they know what's straight behind it in terms of the onslaught of
Mm-hmm.
emails and nurture sequences and newsletters. Like, they protect that with their life now. So if they're
Yep.
giving it to you, it's because they are serious about potentially working with you. I actually had a prospect today. I made the short list. I was like so excited, right? Because when you know your marketing's work, like you did a thing, like your own
Right.
marketing as an agency is doing a thing, and somebody shows up and fills in that form. I have to add that field, by the way. I keep meaning to. I have no idea. I sort of figured out how she found us. I knew I was connected to somebody who had been on my podcast 5 years ago. I see her in my feed all the time. I'm always engaging with her content. I know she gets our newsletter. So I know that our marketing for the last 5 years has been hanging out with this person. And now that they're ready to engage with an agency, we made the short list. And so she filled in the form. We had this great conversation this morning.
Nice.
But it's like, you just have to create this consistency now of building that trust up, because they're not, this woman, she filled in the form. We sent her an email that said, "Wonderful, we're looking forward to meeting you. Book a meeting." She couldn't book a meeting because she's in Australia and we're in the US. So she actually emailed us. And I was like, was she serious? Like, she really wants to work with us, right? It's those intent signals of like, when you really work, when you really hit somebody with your message and you really make that connection, like that's where we need to get to. And I just feel like we've broken so much trust over the years with buyers because of how this sort of marketing system, this gamification
Mm-hmm.
sort of happened. And now we are where we are. Let's get back to the AI search of it all
Yeah.
and talk about, and dark social is sort of an indicator of this too. We have to measure this differently,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So it's the leading indicators have changed.
Yep.
It's not the MQL. It's not the click-through rate. It's not even sessions on a website, although your conversion rate is something you should definitely be checking out, see
Of course.
if that's actually gone up. Less sessions, but better conversions, to your point. So in your opinion, Scott, now what, we have that form fill, which I think is great. We need to all get that on our website. What other leading indicators should we really be measuring to know that, like, we're doing all of this activity, we're trying to show up as in many places as possible now and build that digital footprint? Is any of it working? How do we know?
I think the best way to know if something is working or not is to ask them, is to ask that potential client, is to put that out there when you're putting your content out there. Asking them what kind of content they want to read about. These are things that I've kind of drifted away from because I kind of get down these little rabbit holes of things that I love to, really preach about, get on my soapbox about, whatever. But finding out what they want to learn about and finding out what they need to see. That is the way. Again, like you said, people buy differently than they used to buy. It's those days of, like I mentioned, I worked in that health tech company. You get that lead just because the guy couldn't sleep at 2 a.m. and decided to download an ebook, and just was interested, and he gets a phone call the next day within, as they said, it has to be within 24 hours. I mean, that to me is off-putting. It's very off-putting that all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I just wanted to see something, and it's like, now this salesperson's going down this, let's find a needle in a haystack kind of thing. So how do you find out? Well, you got to find out, first of all, where does your audience sit? Well, they're not sitting on your website. They're sitting in different places. They're, as I mentioned, how did you find us? Are we focusing too much on, reels on Insta? Are we focusing too much? And I'm talking organic. Are we focusing too much on, there's so many different things, focusing on just one thing too much, but finding out, okay, put together this manual attribution model that says, okay, we're getting a lot of responses that people are seeing our live podcasts on YouTube. That's where they're seeing us, or they're seeing us on LinkedIn. But nobody ever checks off TikTok and nobody ever checks off Instagram. Okay, so well, we can put our stuff on there, but let's not focus too much on it.
Yeah,
Let's focus more on the other things. And that I think is just, it's engaging in creative conversation with different people in different audiences. And at the same time, understanding that you don't put out things that you're trying to sell.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting out information that they can use,
Yes.
for free. And people
Yes.
sometimes are afraid to do that. They think they're giving away the store. And I'm like, no, you're not giving away the store. If you're putting out content after content after content about what they can do and how they can do it, and this is what they should be doing, and this is, the stuff they should try, then, people are going to listen, and they'll look at you as an expert. And then they'll say, something, if they're putting out this kind of stuff for free, I wonder what they'll put out if I paid them.
Yeah.
So I think
And
that's
it-
probably
yeah.
the best way to do it.
And it's not new.
It's not new. It's not new at all. But I mean, how many times do you get in-mails or cold emails that give you a plethora list of, everything that they do and what they've done and all their examples and all their use cases and links to their calendars? And do you want to chat? I don't know who you are. Who
Yeah.
are you sending me this information? I have no idea. And then I
Yeah.
go to
And
look
they
for
start
you
off
and I,
with,
what?
we start off with like trying to connect with you of how they saw this case study or they read this.
Yeah,
blog post.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
It feels so forced.
Yeah. And when I reach out, it's more, I saw you here. I love, love that you commented on this, love to chat with you and just learn. No. And I always tell it when I sit there and write it, I always say, no, what's the wording I always use? Nothing, like there's nothing, I have
Pitching?
no, what's that?
Not pitching.
Yeah.
pitching.
It's, I'm not trying to pitch anything. It's not, I'm just want to learn more about what you're doing and how you're doing it, because I saw that was a great
Yep.
post, that's it. I mean, LinkedIn is great in so many ways, but one of the downfalls I think of LinkedIn, this goes back to the beginning, was that it was just like, it was just hooking up with anybody you can meet, anybody that friended that try to connect with you, you connect with, and I connect with them. How many times have somebody come to you and said,
Mhm.
geez, Carrie, I see so-and-so. Can you give me an introduction? I know them, but just from connecting with them 10 years ago, but I don't necessarily know who they
I
are.
know them.
Yeah, I'm happy to let them know, I guess, but now you're
I only
introducing
do it
someone
for
you
people
don't know
who
to
are
someone
trying
you
to find a
don't know.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only try and do
Yeah.
it for when, people I know,
Yeah.
who've been on the podcast or I have some sort of connection with, and they're looking for a job. Even if I don't really have a good relationship with the person I'm connecting them to, I always try and follow that through because, man, job hunting right now, that's a whole other podcast.
Well, that's a whole other story for people. Absolutely. Which is part of the reason I got back in. I started this up again. That was the exact reason
Yeah.
I started up, because I was tired of being, as much as I love working internally in startups and I love working internally with small teams, you're at the whim of the company, and I was working with a company as an example that, when I got there, there were, like 15 marketers. A year later, they were down to 8. There were some issues. I was asked to kind of take over something that had to do with what should have been under customer success, but that customer success person had left. And I found out that we had customers that were just mostly miserable. They were not happy. So as much as we might have been getting customers in the front door, they were walking out the back at the same time. And that's where RevUps, that's where things need to be fixed. And they say, whoa, but we're not getting any new business. Well, maybe because we don't have any good business behind it, meaning customers that are so happy that they're willing to be,
Advocates.
an ambassador for the company in a sense, I mean, I found a few that were very, very happy, and that's great. But that's where companies say, oh, well, we got to cut back on marketing now because marketing isn't doing their job. Well, but yeah, as a company, we have to do this whole thing together. We should not be living in silos at a company. Marketing does this, sales does this, customer success does this. We have to be able to put it all together and find out what's working and what's not. I was with this larger company briefly, and I was running these major ABM campaigns from these multi-million-dollar contracts. I kind of came in at the very end of it, this more one-to-one reach out, And I would get messages from from sales teams in Japan and other some other places that I was working with, and they would say, "Yeah, stop with the messages, stop the messaging to them, stop the messaging to them." I'm like, "Why?" I said, "They're already a customer, they're already a client of ours." And they said, "Well, because it was our new product," and he said, "Yeah, but the problem is they have a lot of issues and they're really not very happy right now. So you kind of want to stay away from that." And I ran into that so often.
Uh,
And,
yeah.
that's just not cool. I mean, I'm
No,
sorry,
we
it's
really need to
not
fix.
cool. If you have unhappy clients and
You fix it
unhappy
first.
customers, sorry, you're not going to
Well, I
make
think
it.
that's one of the problems with. I think that's one of the problems with how enterprises are functioning right now, and why they're also not showing up in AI is because what their customers are saying about them,
Mm-hmm.
which is not always very good, is
Mm-hmm.
not aligned to what they're saying about themselves. And so, because there's not that alignment,
Mm-hmm.
they're not getting recommended or mentioned. And so, yes, you have to have fundamentally at your core, you have to have happy customers who are out there talking about your differentiators and why you, because that's now going to align. So, man, people could get away with not having happy customers maybe before, but they definitely need them. You need them now. If you are having a problem internally with your customers and your
Yeah.
communication and them not, loving your product, definitely start there. Oh my gosh.
Because
So important.
it's what's interesting is that it's to your point exactly. Just as it's so easy now, let's say a customer is so upset or they're upset about something or they were asked a question. Let's say they were on like a Reddit or this or something else and comments. Well, guess what? AI is going to pull from everywhere. And I
Mm-hmm.
have seen, like, when I sit there and say, well, I might go into, can you give me a quick background about this company, what people are saying about them, this and that? Well, you will see the positive and you will see the negative.
Mm-hmm.
It pulls it off.
And the
It's not even
negatives
a
so much
matter of
easier to talk about.
exactly. And that's the point.
Yeah.
And you nailed it. I mean,
It's like
negative
what you
is
said
so
about the
much easier.
restaurants earlier.
Exactly. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
People, well, I mean, come on. Yelp went through lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit about that because
Yep.
you gave, consumers so much power by sitting there saying, oh, my bagel was bad the other morning. I'm taking you down, kind of thing.
Oh, I
Or,
know. That's,
right? They
yeah.
went through a whole thing years ago about that. There were lawsuits involved, regarding that. So I don't even look at any.
I don't
And
look at
something
Yelp.
I
I
used to.
can't trust
It's
it.
funny. I switched over to, I always look at reviews. I love to look at reviews. Living as a quick example. Living in the South, there's a couple of things that us Northerners miss. Is pizza, good bagels, and sorry, good Chinese food too. It's one thing that we miss. And you're always looking and trying to find and what's out there and what's happening. Well, I tend to stay away from Yelp, and I started working more on Google reviews and looking at those. But
Mm-hmm.
then I started realizing, especially since I was a part of it, because I was helping a company, you know, work on their brand utilizing reviews, is that, and I'm sure you've gotten these, we've all gotten these. You go somewhere, it could be your chiropractor, it could be the dentist, could be anybody, and they sit there and say, hey, did you like what you did? Da, 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 da. Would you be willing to give us a review on Google? They give you a link, boom, you do it, done. And I'm happy to do it in many cases. I really
Yeah.
am. And
Same.
I've never given, I think, a bad review. I've just not given a review if it's bad. But this is how they get their 5-star reviews. It's not because somebody's being, if somebody's mad, oh, they'll get on there and they'll knock the crap out of you,
Yeah.
without anybody asking them to. But
Yeah.
if
And they'll do it on the
somebody,
wrong profile sometimes. We have a
and yeah,
bad review
and
right
they'll,
now. That's
yeah,
not even for us.
and
It's
sometimes it'll
like,
get pulled down because
I
they
can't get it. I can't get Google to take it down. Like, this has nothing to do with us.
right,
I even like
exactly.
emailed the guy. I was like, "Can you please take this down?" But he doesn't know how. And I think he's in Ireland, but he ended up on a US. It was
Uh-huh.
anyway. So now I'm just
No,
like, I just
but
got to
it's
get good
true. And
reviews.
now,
And
oh, we have
yeah,
500 5-star reviews. Well, that's because you asked 500 people that were, or actually probably
good
5,000 people to get
customers.
those 500, that they were happy to please leave a review,
Yeah.
which is nice. But
Yes.
unfortunately, I think it skews it a lot. It's not independent, and
True. You do
that's
need like, well, even the G2 reviews aren't necessarily independent, right?
the
Because you're
same
asking
thing.
client. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Same
So
thing. Yep.
I But you do need the reviews. Like it's
Absolutely.
really
Oh, I'm
important,
not saying you
especially
don't.
now.
Yep.
We're even thinking internally of like how we ask our customers who've been, okay, you've been with us for 3 months. How's it going? Would you mind giving us a Google review? If they've been with
Yep.
us for years, it's like, would you mind giving us a clutch review? Um, yeah, I mean, having a review uh, system is imperative now because again, you
Yep.
need that corroboration between what you think about you as a brand and what your customers are saying. So even if
Exactly.
it's skewed, it just needs to be part of the system for sure.
Exactly. And one thing I do love is that when I look at reviews I do look at reviews, especially for restaurants. I'm a foodie. We love to go out. I want to see, okay, what people are saying. And, I want to see the good and the bad. But I also take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
Meaning if you see, because what does everybody focus on? You see all these great 5-star reviews, then you see a couple 2, 3-star reviews, and there may be a 1-star review in
you
there,
need to go
and
read
they just get
those.
slammed. And a lot of people look at those, oh, they're going to take the power of those 3 over the other ones. Some people are just miserable. Some people just you'll never make
Well,
happy
sometimes
no
it's
matter
just
what you
looking at the
do.
date, like, looking if like
It was
I
10 years
was.
ago, or
Yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or it's the other way around where all the good reviews are like from months ago, but then the bad reviews start showing up and they're newer, right?
right.
So you definitely need to be like critical about how you read them. But AI's, um, I don't know that AI is taking all that into consideration. So having a good review system is definitely key. What is Scott, we've kind of danced around a lot of ideas around in terms of showing up in AI. We've planted a lot of seeds in terms of foundation, reviews being one of them,
Yep.
consistent messaging being another. We talked about some tactics, but out of all the things we talked about, if somebody was leaving this podcast right now and they only needed to go do one thing to start building that digital footprint for a B2B tech business,
Hmm.
where would you recommend they start?
I'd recommend they start putting out content everywhere. And I'm not just talking written content. I'm talking taking content that you've written. I'm talking doing videos, podcasts such as this, guest podcasting, getting yourself into groups and chat groups, whether it be on Slack or different mediums, where you can sit there and talk to people. That look up those messages, look at what people are saying when you post something, respond to them. If they're don't like what you say, if they disagree with what you say, don't get into a battle with them, but just make it, get into a discussion with them. Maybe it's offline, maybe it's offline. It'll help teach you what you should put out, what you shouldn't put out. But all this stuff, if it's in the public domain, even though it may be on a private site, it will start to be pulled out. It will start to be extracted. People will start to share it. And once it's shared, it will start to make its way into this whole vernacular of AI. It will happen. But the idea is you have to really keep your ear to the ground and see what's happening and listen to what people are saying and respect what people are saying and be willing to make those changes and ask them questions and ask them what they would like and what they would prefer. It's really engaging that audience, engaging with them, not saying this is what I'm selling you. It's right here. Do you want it or not? It's like, no, what are you
That's why
looking
I
for?
started a podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
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 And that's why I love being, guests on a podcast. What I say isn't the all end all be all by any means. I don't think anybody has that end all be all. My process
Not
just
right
always
now.
been that I'm not afraid to try new things. I'm not afraid to test new things. I'm not afraid to, I embraced AI, but I'm not owned by AI. I love it.
Yeah.
I work with it. Yes. Do I write content with it? Absolutely. I'm not going to, some people say, oh, it's not AI. Something you can write if you prepare and you know what you're doing, where
Mhm.
you can actually create an article that is all you because you have built this thing up that it knows exactly what your thing is. I mean, I've plugged in my emails and how I write and how I talk and what I say and what my thought process is. So it knows me. Do I
Yeah.
still review it? Absolutely. The problem is there's something now, a term which frankly I didn't hear about until just a few months ago, called AI slop.
Yep. AI
Where
slop.
people are just saying, oh, well, now I can post on LinkedIn 3, 4, 5 times a week. And they put up the stuff, and it's so obvious, that I mean, I have gotten stuff emailed to me, email marketing stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that just What did you do? Just
Yeah,
pull a
female
whole
marketing
thing
wasn't
from my
in trouble
LinkedIn
before.
page? Is that what you did?
Yeah.
You just pulled my LinkedIn page, plugged it in, and said, write them an email? Because this is obvious. I mean, there's the telltale signs, of course, the M dashes and all that stuff, but I'm just talking about the personality and the content of it.
You can feel the tone of AI,
Totally.
like
Totally.
of where it's been well written, even if it was the help with AI versus when it's pure AI. But I love what you're saying, and I think it's so important. And I've been sort of shouting it from the mountaintops, even though we don't necessarily help with positioning and messaging.
Yeah.
I have wonderful partners like yourself and some other people and some other fractional marketing leaders who do this, because it's just where we all need to get back to basics. Even if you're an enterprise, you need to redefine your positioning and messaging in the new era of AI search. And I love what you're saying about listening.
Yeah.
If you can
People don't
listen first.
Yeah.
Oh, if you can listen first to your audience and really hear what they're saying, like the world is shifting underneath our feet. I'm literally writing a book about how to build the marketing systems from the ground up and what you need to do it. And the unsexy foundation stuff that just needs to get done to allow you to build on something strong that can compound, right? And the listening piece and the positioning and messaging is really that first step that everybody skips because they want to get into market and they want to just start, spending money for whatever reason, and then none of it works and they don't know why. And man, listening to your audience and really understanding what the problem is and what you solve. Everybody's talking about, they're not talking about AEO, they're not talking about GEO, they're not even talking about SEO now. It's AI search. That is what people are talking about, right? So now I have to pivot all my messaging to match the market. It's like what you were talking about before. I'm a small business. I can pivot on a dime, and I sure as hell am to meet the market and to hear what they're talking about, how they're talking about it. And you have to listen.
Yeah.
And
listening is what it always is. As we interrupt each other, I interrupt you all the time. Listening is what it's all about. Yeah. You have to listen to what people are looking for, what people want. You can't just shove it down their throat and say, this is what we have to offer. Do you like it or not? And this is how we do business. Do you like it or not? You have to be willing to take care of these people. I mean, customers are valuable, and your existing customers are even more valuable. If you're not taking care of your existing customers, forget about upselling them or cross-selling them or whatever you do as a company. They're not going to be happy. And if they're not happy, trust me, they're going to tell their friends. They're going to tell people they know. Do not do business with this company. Everybody has relationships with different people in the same industry, just at different companies. Do not do business with this company. Why would you want that? You want to be an ambassador for the company. You want your customers to say, yeah, I love this company. You want them to be willing to do a video testimonial for you. You want them to be willing to come on a podcast with you. Hey, we have this person, yes, we chose some of our customers, but they're the first people we want to because, they seem to be very happy. So we're not paying them for this. They're happy,
Yes.
And that's what it's about.
And they bring you along. And they bring you along.
And they bring you along with them.
And they bring you
Absolutely.
along.
Yeah.
So that has been our story, which has been the most amazing 15 years of just working with some amazing people who love what we do, leave to the next company, and continuously bring us along. That is what it's all about.
Yeah,
Scott,
I love that.
One last question for you. Where can people find you? Follow along and engage with your content and what you're doing.
Best place is always LinkedIn. It's under Scott Wasserman on LinkedIn. I actually finally put up a website.
Yes, you did.
I did. Thank you, Claude. It's wassermanrevenue.com. It'll give you some basics. It also talks about something called the AI fix, which I just kind of came up with out of a whim, just because I was seeing these things and seeing what people were going through and knowing what I've gone through over the years as far as how to deal with, the day-to-day stuff that AI can actually take away or take off their plate in a sense. And they can focus on the things that need to get done. And I started doing that just as an additional thing, not just for B2B tech SaaS, but for anybody that is overwhelmed with their day-to-day, these emails that I have to send back, or these, email follow-ups, content they never get to, explaining the same things over and over and over, and, admin scheduling, all that stuff, social media, customers, questions, customer support, and they wind up doing this stuff like, Sunday night or Friday night because they just had no time during the week. I found a way to actually set up a system where one-shot deal, they come in, give me their biggest issues, we talk for a few minutes, I put the whole thing together for them, put all the prompts together for them, show them how to use them, and it's done. And if it works, and it has in the few, this is fairly new, but the few people I've worked with on this love it, have been so happy that it's just saved them time. It saves them time, which is kind of cool. And I've always been in the business of helping people, whether it be through sales. Like I said, I was part of the hair club. Look what it did for me. Not now, but look what it did for me. And how it can make you feel, how it can make you look, all that stuff. Going forward to in marketing, and I was a marketing major. Going forward in marketing, where what's a marketer's job, especially in demand generation. A marketer's job is a demand gen's person's job is to make the sales team happy.
Yes.
You make the sales team happy, everybody's happy. So,
happy.
I guess call it my people pleaser thing. I don't know, but
no, I love it. Yeah. I love it. And so head on over, check it out. If you have anything that you're constantly executing on time and time again, that probably could be automated, hit up Scott and he'll help you streamline that ASAP. The time is now. Make it happen. Scott, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks for the invite. That was fun. Always fun. Always fun.
Always fun.
All right.
Yes. As we mentioned, you can find Scott Wasserman on LinkedIn and his website. Go connect, especially if you're a founder or operator who needs a marketing leader who measures in pipeline, not activity. If there's one thing to take away with you, stop treating your ranking as the scorecard. Actually, I'm not going to read this because we totally went off topic. And if there's one thing that you need to take away from this conversation, I know, but that's the beauty of it. I love it. Mm-hmm. There's one thing you need to take away from this is to listen to your customers, take care of your customers, and build a relationship with them because they are your foundation and your fuel, and they will help you build up that marketing engine from the ground up and take care of you along the way while you do it. So be sure to, go look internally and see where there's some opportunity that it could be huge. It could be huge.
Yep.
I love this. And I haven't talked about this yet. So that's amazing. That's just, amazing. This episode is brought to you by MKG Marketing. Dan hired us once, then took us to 5 companies. Every agency promises pipeline now. That's just the floor. What you can't find is an agency that gets you, your category, your buyers, the way you work. That's the one that gets the rehired. But thanks for being here, and we will catch you next time.